तिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वापदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरौ। श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सगणरघुनाथान्वितं तां सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं राधा कृष्ण श्री राधा कृष्ण पादान सगण ललित श्री विशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांता राधा कांता नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी विश्वभानुस्तुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवास आदि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। नारायणं नमस्कृत्यं नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। श्रीमता स्वकथा कृष्ण पुण्यश्रवण कीर्तन हृदयन्तस्थो हि अभद्राणि स्वतम् भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तम श्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिके मुखं करोति वाचालं पंगुं लंघयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्री गुरु दीनतारिणम्. I offer my respectful obeisances unto my spiritual master, the deliverer of the fallen souls. His mercy turns the dumb into eloquent speakers and enables the lame to cross the mountains. I seek the blessings of all Vaishnavas. I seek forgiveness for any transgressions I may commit while speaking. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today, we are speaking from the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the status quo. We are in the 6th chapter, which is creation of the universal form. Today, we are going to read verses 13, 14, and 15. Nirbhinam talo varuno lokapale avishadhare jihva amshena cha rasa yayasau pratipadite. When the palette of the gigantic form was separately manifested, Varuna, the director of the water in the planetary systems, entered therein, and thus the living entity has the facility to taste everything with his tongue. Verse number 14. Nirbhinne ashvinau nase Vishnu Vishnur avishtham padam घृणे नंशेन गंधस्य परिपक्तये यथो भवेत्. When the Lord's two nostrils separately manifested themselves, the dual Ashwini Kumaras entered them in their proper positions, and because of this, the living entities can smell the aromas of everything. Nirbhinne akshini twasta lokapale avishad vibho chakshuramshena rupanam paripaktayer yatho bhave. Therefore, two gigantic eyes of the gigantic form of the Lord were separately manifested. The sun, the director of light, entered them with the partial representation of eyesight, and thus the living entities can have vision of forms. So wonderful 3 verses, almost like factual statements. That's why Prabhupada has not given any detailed purports on these 3 things. However, one thing comes to my mind the moment I read the first one, when the palette of the gigantic form, this is the tongue, was separately manifested, Varuna, the director of the water in the planetary systems, entered therein, and thus the living entities had the facility to taste everything. So in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, I am the taste of the water. And here, it's being established why. Varuna, the director, is now sitting on the tongue, and that is how he takes charge of the entire. So whoever has a tongue will have Varuna directing it. The same way, the explanation is being given about how the two nostrils, are presided by Ashwini Kumaras, and how they are all, because of them, we are able to smell. And then the third one has said that the sun, the Lord Aditya, he is the director of light. He enters the two eyeballs, and thus we are enabled to see the living forms. How do we understand this? This all seems like high speak. Probably somebody just wrote about it. But if you really look at current day machinery also, what happens is there is the machine, and in front of the machine there is a sensor, and this sensor, how does it interact with the machine? And there are connections that are made. The sensor senses something, but what does it do? It translates the whatever it sensed as zeros and ones and transmits it back to the machine. What does the machine do? The machine takes it and passes it into the processing center. The processing center here could be a computer or something else, and then once it processes it, then it sends a signal. The very same way the Lord, when he created the universe, he assumed, he designed all of this in such a way that, the body can act as a machine. Now, just to step back a little bit, this entire chapter, started when the demigods, they could not move forward. They didn't know how to work and how to do what they were supposed to do. They had already approached in chapter 5 the Supreme Lord, and they had actually asked the Supreme Lord to, give them instructions and bless them so they could all do their work. And then at the beginning of chapter 6, what happens? Rishi Maitreya, he starts explaining how creation happened. So in the very beginning, Lord Kshirodakashayi Vishnu remembered the prayers of the demigods, saw the creative functions suspended elements in an unmixed state. So the elements had not mixed. Now, if you go back to your high school or middle school physics, one of the things that we read is inertia. What does inertia say? The law of inertia says that anything in motion will continue to be in motion, or anything that is still will continue to stay still until and unless there is an external force that acts on it. It's the same thing here. All these elements are sitting there, but nothing is happening. So what does the Lord do? He agitates it. How does he agitate it? He sends his Bhibrat Shakti, or the cohesive energy, which amalgamated all the elements and forms a golden universal act. So he sent this energy, and then what happened? This energy acts as a coagulant. It mixes everything and makes things stick to each other. And thus, the Hiranyagarbha is formed. The golden universal like a fetus. In fact, it is a fetus. That's why it's called Garbha. With all the living entities reside for 1,000 celestial years on the Karanam ocean. And what did they do? They were gestating for 1,000 celestial years. Nothing else happens. They just gestating. Lord Garbhodakashayi Vishnu entered the golden universe egg. Now again the Lord enters, and gives it life. All the living entities, including the demigods, were enlivened as if awakened from sleep. Until then, they were all in suspended animation. The moment Garbhodakashayi Vishnu enters the Hiranyagarbha, then life is given. And with that life, the energy is flowing. Now everyone is awakened. They are awakened at different states. The Virata Purusha differentiated into the functioning universe consisting of 3 Shaktis. Now what happens? Further processing is happening. The 3 Shaktis were subdivided into 1, 10, and 3 respectively. We actually read about this. The 1 is the Jiva Shakti, consciousness of Jivas. 10 is the Prana Shakti, or the 10 life airs. we read about this too. Prana, Apana, Samana, Udana, Vyana, Naga, Karkara, Kurma, Devadatta, and Dhananjay. These are the 10 life airs. And, again, the thought may come, what are these 10 airs? What does it do? If you go to a mechanical engineer or a pneumatics specialist, what you learn from them is for the mechanical parts of a giant earth mover to move, you need pneumatic pressure. Without pneumatics, you cannot actually do anything with those machines. So pneumatics is a way by which you compress air and direct it in a particular way so huge arms lift up, fall down, do stuff, pick up things, dig. All of this happens. The same way, these 10 airs, they are aiding the body. The body is a machine. The body needs to have some sort of pressure, and that pressure should, what is being explained is it emanates from the heart and then it travels everywhere. And that is how we are able to function. The life air is the very life air that sustains us. Then one by one, everything is explained in those things. Then the three Atma Shaktis, self-identification, is also differentiated. Adhyatma is a subtle sense. Then Adibhauta, the gross sense organs and sense objects. So these gross sense organs and sense objects are operated by these 10 airs. When the when the soul is willing something or thinking something and wants to act, these are the airs that will act upon. And how will these airs act upon? It is on the direction of these demigods who are sitting in those places. So if the mind thinks, hey, I want to taste something, then the Lord who presides over our hand will direct, and the air that is related to that will go, pick up the food, put it on your tongue. And in the tongue is sitting Varuna Deva, and he allows you to taste it. How? He takes that and he takes that whatever the information is there in that, it reaches our brain, and the brain thinks, I am enjoying it. So until we get that feedback, it will be sitting on the tongue and nothing else happens. Okay? So this is precisely how it actually works. It's all being described. If you put one and one together, you will understand. This is how things are working. And then Adidaiva, or the sense devata. So you can see what is the relation between all of this. The relation is that we need to connect all of these together and come to this. So the next several verses in this chapter is all related to identifying who are the devatas who are presiding on different parts of the body. So mouth is fire, and the subtle organ for the mouth is a voice, so that we can express ourselves. The palate or talu is Varuna, and Jihva is the tongue to taste everything. Nostrils or the Ashwini Kumaras, nose or grana, the smell of aroma of everything can come through. Eyes or Surya, the eyesight, Chakshu, to see various forms. There's so many others. I don't want to talk about all of those because, tomorrow and after tomorrow, there's still devotees reading it. However, what I want to do is I want to go to Bhagavad Gita. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says something very interesting, and let us go through that. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, verse number 61. Krishna is saying, Ishvara sarva bhutani hudeshu arjuna hitashtati brahmanya sarva bhutani yantra rudani mayaya. So what is the Supreme Lord saying? The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated on a machine made of material energy. So the picture is very vivid and very clear. It is almost like there is a robot, and in the robot, somebody is sitting and operating the robot. Here, actually, Prabhupada explains it in his purport so clearly that, actually, I'll go through the purport. Arjuna was not the supreme knower, and his decision to fight or not to fight was confined to his limited discretion. Lord Krishna instructed that the individual is not all in all. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, or he himself, Krishna, as the localized super soul, sits in the heart, directing the living being After changing bodies, the living entity forgets his past deeds, but the super soul, as the knower of the past, present, and the future, remains the witness of all his activities. Therefore, all the activities of the living entities are directed by the super soul. The living entity gets what he deserves and is carried by the material body, which is created in the material energy. Under the direction of the super soul, as soon as a living entity is placed in a particular type of body, he has to work under the spell of the bodily situation. So we are confined, we get, because of our past deeds, we have now selected a new body, and that body that we enter has some limitations. We have to work within those limitations once we enter that body. And that is exactly what is Prabhupada is explaining. A person seated in a high-speed motor car goes faster than one seated in a slower car. Though the living entities, the drivers, may be the same. Similarly, by the order of the Supreme Soul, material nature fashions a particular type of body to a particular type of living entity so that he may work according to his past desires. The living entity is not independent. One should not think himself independent of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The individual is always under the Lord's control. Therefore, one's duty is to surrender, and that is the invention of the next. So if going further into this canto third, there is a place where actually it is explained how all the bodies are also created by the Lord. Once Brahma organizes the universe in a particular way, all he has to do is pick up the living entities and match a suitable body that the Lord has already prepared, and just associate the body and the soul together. That is all that Brahma is going to do, and that is what is being explained here. These are all different bodies. We have selected those, and we have to get into those. Once we get into those, then that's all. And what is the super soul? For us, when we drive a vehicle, what do we have? We have a license with us. And if we change the car, the license still goes with us. And the cop can track us no matter what car we are driving. Just because I'm driving a different car, it doesn't mean I'm a different person. The cop knows exactly that I am so and so. Doesn't matter which car I'm driving or which vehicle I'm driving. It's the very similar way the super soul is sitting. He knows our identity. He never forgets our identity. Like the cop and the system tracks what all we did, all the tickets we have, the same way the Supreme Lord has a way of tracking every single thing that we do. Now let us take a look at verse number 16 in the same chapter. So this is again Bhagavad Gita 8th chapter 16th verse. I'll not read the Sanskrit. Therefore, one who thinks himself the only doer, not considering the 5 factors, is certainly not very intelligent and cannot see things as they are. What does it mean? A foolish person cannot understand that the super soul is sitting as a friend within and conducting his actions. So even the actions we are doing, we are not doing. We are thinking we are doing, but it is being conducted. Conducted by whom? Conducted by the super soul through the various devatas. It is almost like you can imagine a concert. In the concert, what happens? People are singing, then there are musicians who are using the instruments and all those things. But there is one entity who is connecting all of them, and that is the conductor. It is on the direction of the conductor, all the vocalists or the instrumentalists, they all work on that. The conductor says, stop, everyone stops. The conductor says, rise the pitch for a particular set of musicians, they will do that. The others will pause, all of that. But the entire thing is conducted by whom? The conductor. The same way, the demigods are all sitting. They can manage all the particular body parts, but the instruction has to come from the Lord. Sometimes we have control, like we think and we can do it. Sometimes even when we want to do it, even when we have all the functional organs, we cannot do something. We are frozen. The thing is, it is the Lord who sanctions what we can do and what we cannot do. And now, there's also this mention of the 5 factors. What are the 5 factors? Again, this is chapter 18, verse number 14. The place of action, which is the body, the performer, the various scenes, the many different kinds of endeavor, and ultimately the super soul. These are the 5 factors of action. And Prabhupada so nicely explains the word adhishtanam refers to the body. The soul within the body is acting to bring about the results of activity and is therefore known as the karta, the doer. The soul is the knower and the doer is stated in the Shruti. Yesha hi drashta shrashta. Prashna Upanishad 4.9. It is also confirmed in the Vedanta Sutra by the verses no gnato eva and karta shastratva tattvatat 2.3.33. The instruments of action are senses, and by the senses the soul acts in various ways. For each and every action there is a different endeavor. So here again another subtlety. We all read about for every action there's a reaction, but we do not read about what is the one that is initiating that action. And here it's very clearly explained that for every action there is a different endeavor, and that endeavor is from the soul, and that endeavor should be permitted by the super soul. But all one's activities depend on the will of the super soul. So if the will doesn't agree, then nothing can happen. Who is seated within the heart of the friend. The Supreme Lord is the super cause. He is the cause of all causes. Under these circumstances, he who is acting in Krishna consciousness under the direction of the super soul situated within the heart is naturally not bound by any activity. So this is very important. Once somebody is into devotional service and he is doing and he's executing devotional service according to the instructions of the spiritual master or according to the instructions of the Lord, then there is no bondage. For everyone else, there is bondage. Those in complete Krishna consciousness are not ultimately responsible for their actions. Everything is dependent on the supreme will, the super soul, the supreme personality of God. So, what I'm understanding today is that I may think that I am the doer, but I am not really the doer. Everything is executed by the will of the Lord and through his separated entities in the special category of demigods. They are the ones who actually do it. But I get to be in the bondage because it is my will that is being executed. However, if I dovetail my actions according to the instructions of my spiritual master or according to the Supreme Lord, then I will not be in bondage. So that is what I understand from this. Thank you, everyone. If you have any questions or any corrections, please feel free to do so. Thank you so
much. Hare Krishna, Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Guru Maharaj Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna Mataji, thank you so much. Please accept my humble obeisances.
Wonderful class, Prabhu. I really enjoyed and feel like listening to it again. It's so full of, very illustrative, descriptions, how things are happening. And I especially liked your, the cop doesn't care what vehicle you are driving. That analogy is super, Prabhu. I mean, we are collecting tickets birth after birth in different bodies and traveling with the same cop in our body.
Yes,
that's the first time I was. That's very wonderful, actually. And then also the super soul being like the conductor. in the orchestra.
Yeah, Mataji.
I mean, yeah, when our material modes are acting,
Mhm.
somebody wants to verbally abuse someone,
Mhm.
somebody wants to physically abuse someone,
Mhm.
somebody wants to sing a lullaby to a child, and
Mhm.
all those things are being conducted under the supervision of the supreme soul, super soul. Imagine that one. Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, Mataji.
Yeah. Very wonderful, Prabhu. And Yandra, Rudhani, Maya, we are going on in different machines.
Yes, Mataji. Exactly. That when I read that verse the first time, that is the image that stuck in my mind. Till date, it has not changed, Mataji.
Thank you so much, Hare Krishna. It's a very, I mean, I feel like listening again to it. Thank you. Thank you very
so much,
much.
Mataji.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
No, Prabhu. Thank you so much. Second, what Mataji said. So, especially those two analogies. I mean, the orchestra one, I mean, of course, the super soul is dictating everything what we need to do, right? The orchestra analogy that you gave.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the person generally doesn't deviate from there. I mean, you can't do it if you're part of the orchestra.
Yes.
Yeah. So, very nice. True. I mean, of course, we are, but thinking that in that analogy is very nice. I mean, the person is actually doing it, right? If we see it,
Yeah.
right, in the orchestra, it looks like the person is
Correct.
doing, but it's directed by the director.
Exactly.
So,
Yes.
very nice analogy. Yeah, thank you, bro.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Krishna, thank you.
Looks like there's nobody
Yes,
else.
Mataji dropped, I think. So,
Yeah. Thank you, Prabhuji.
okay.
Vancha kalpatarubhyasya kripa sindhobhyo eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ananta koti vaishnava. Hare
Hare Krishna, bro. Thank you.